Hi, I'm Tree and this is Stitchless TV. Now today on Stitchless TV we are going to make the Ogden camisole top. Now for our fabric today, we're doing something a little bit different. Although not different for Stitchless TV, as you can see, we do rather like vintage scarves. So today, our camisole top is going to be made out of a variety of tourism scarves. If you want to know where I get my vintage scarves from, then you should go and watch our sewing vlog of Portobello Market. So before we begin, I just want to show you a few things on the pattern. First of all, very important is that the sewing pattern already includes a ½ inch seam allowance. So as a size 12, I've gone for a size 6. And then when you need to trace off your pattern, you've got to look at their size key chart. And for me, the size 6 was the continuous straight line. So then you need to trace off your pattern. When I traced off my pattern, I used a tracing wheel. And even though on the Ogden Cami paper pattern, they do it so you cut it to the fold, I always like mine, when I trace it out, I like to do it, so I do it on the paper, I do it to a fold so that I get like a whole piece for the front. So you've got to trace off your size, so mine's a size 6, which I'm hoping is a size 12, well I know it's a size 12. Trace off the back and the front. Now they also have facings, but the facings are exactly the same as your front and back, except they stop somewhere like here. So trace those off as well if you like, but I'm just going to use my front and back pieces. So if you're just using a regular fabric for your camisole, obviously you can still follow the tutorial, it will be more or less the same thing, but we're cutting our camisole, or we're trying to squeeze it out of a vintage scarf. So this is what we did. So I really did struggle to get this camisole out of one scarf, but I did manage it, look. But on the back piece I had to add a little piece of fabric, but that was fine. So I've cut my facing out of some plain fabric, and then the front piece of my camisole and the back piece out of the scarf. So I more or less folded over the scarf and then cut that section out of it. Now I do want it to be cropped, but I'm actually going to add something onto the end afterwards. But let's see how much time we've got. Now something else that I did that I think is helpful, particularly when you've got slippery fabrics. When you put your facing, so the white one, which will be like a lining, and your top fabric together in the perfect position, give yourself just a couple of tiny little snips, because it will make it much easier to line it up when you attach your facing. I was just about able to squeeze some ties out of my leftover bits of the edge of the scarf. Now we do have a tutorial on how to do stretchy spaghetti straps, and it is exactly the same thing but without elastic inside. So you could go and watch that, but I'll just quickly show you how I did these straps. So that was my border piece, and I've pressed it over because it's always easier to sew when you press your fabric, and I'm just going to sew a seam allowance away because I want that white bit to fall in the middle if possible. So just stitch along your length of fabric So my fabric is about, if we're working in inches, about 1.5 inches wide, folded over. So you end up with this, and this is called a loop turner, but you could just as easily use a doubled up long piece of thread and a needle and slip the needle in backwards. Go in and out one end and then slip it in backwards and start turning it. Or a safety pin, if your safety pin fits in. Look, there's a little hook and there's this little door gate thing that closes. So you want the hook open, and you want it to grab your fabric, and then the door will close, and then you start turning your fabric. Now if you want to do really small thin ties, make sure your fabric is strong, slippery and quite thin, and you would trim off this excess. Okay, so you keep it like all really thin. They must also be cut on the cross. So in normal situations, spaghetti straps should be cut on the cross so that it kind of stretches a little bit. And as you sew them, you sort of stretch like your fabric a little bit too. But I didn't have enough fabric for that, so I haven't done my straps on the cross, and they will be fine. So we're pulling this through. Look, there it is. So once it comes through, just grab hold of it. Now, you can't see that I'm actually licking my fingers, which I know is disgusting, but it's a really good way to grab fabric. And then what I'll do is, I've put a knot in each end of it, and I'm going to fold it over and cut it in half, so I end up with 2 straps. So I don't know if you're like this, but if I've got something fiddly to do in a sewing project, I kind of like to get them done first of all. So I'm going to do more of the fiddly bits, but before I do, I think I will stitch my straps on to the front of my camisole, just sort of stitch them in place. Right, we only need 2 of the straps, okay, and we need our camisole front. So I'm going to put the facing over to one side, and I'll get rid of the back. So, now I've found in my sewing workshops that lots of people get really confused about this. So even though you know that when you wear your camisole, the straps come up like this, don't they? But you don't stitch them on in that way, and you'll find out why as we go along. What you need to do is you need to put your straps right sides together with your camisole. So you put them right sides together, and then you put a little stay stitch there and a little stay stitch there with your sewing machine. So it's in the centre of this space, and then you're just going to stitch your seam allowance away. Now this is going to be where you attach your facing, and the seam allowance will be quite small. So I'm just going to do 1/4 inch away from the edge, just to hold them in place. So we don't actually do the ones on the back until we've applied most of the facing. Right, I think we're ready to start sewing the main part of the camisole together. Now when you have a slippery, floppy fabric like this, you may want to do a French seam. But I think we've messed around enough with this pattern as it is, so I'm going to try and keep it simple-ish. So all you simply do is, so that's my front, this is my front, and this is my back. So I'm going to put my front and back pieces right sides together, and I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to sew their suggested seam allowance away from the edge and then overlock it just on one side. Now when you have these slippy fabrics, really just line it all up really nicely and just give yourself just a couple of little notches to keep track of it being lined up. It just makes your life so much easier. So we just stitched one side seam together and overlocked it as well. And then do exactly the same to your facing. So you'll stitch up one side seam and overlock it. Now I also overlocked along the bottom of my facing as well. Now when you've done that, what you would normally do is you put all of that right sides together with your fabric, really carefully lining everything up nicely. And then you begin to stitch it on. Now when you do stitch it on, to begin with, you'll start where that side seam isn't sewn up, and then with a small seam allowance start coming all the way round all your edges. So that's the front bit there, coming across around the armpit. So you're going to stitch around the back as well, but you're going to leave these bits here where the ties go. You leave those until the end. Okay, so you're going to come across there, stop, leave a hole, come across the back. Yes, I know it's a different shape, but I needed to include my windmill. And then come across the back and then across the armhole. For the people that are adding a frill, if you have normal, non-slippery fabric that's not going to go out of shape, then you can apply your frill right sides together to your fabric, creating a little bit of extra gathering around these corner bits here because they will need it, and then just trace out the shape of your upper part of your camisole. Now if you have got slippery fabric, you may prefer to add this to your facing. So that's the situation for me. So I'm just going to move my camisole out the way. Because the main part of my camisole is made of such slippery fabric, I think it'd be better if I apply it to my facing first, which is a much more stable fabric. So instead of adding it right sides together, I've got to do it in reverse, don't I? So I'm going to do it wrong sides together. So I've stitched my frill on, which I think is okay. Right, so all you people doing normal things, you can come back now, because this is what you will be doing. So you simply get your top and you put it right sides together with the facing. Now we've only got the ties on the front, remember, and they're hanging down. So line up your top with your facing at the front and at the back. And remember, you're going to sew, I would do it in stages actually, do the front first. So I'm going to sew around the front, that very small seam allowance, coming down to the centre front. I'm going to pivot my needle there and then come up again so I get a sharp bit there, which I'll then snip into, and come to your armpit. And then get ready then to sew around the back, but the back, you're going to leave two little gaps, yeah? And then go around there, and you're going to leave a gap there, and you're going to stop on the side seam. So have a really good look at that. So that's the front, coming around the armhole. Now that's the bit where we left a gap, because later on we're going to pass the, well, if you're doing all in one strap, you'll pass the other end of the strap through there, but we're doing two ties, so I'll put the other tie there. and then coming around. Now what's really important is a couple of things. So obviously we've still got it in a two-dimensional way. We haven't sewn up the side seams. Also, the only way that I can keep track of all this material, I could use pins, but I didn't. I used notches. Look, I've got notches everywhere to keep track of the facing and the camisole fabric. So now we've got to snip into all of our curves and all of our points and then press it. Okay, that might have been a bit hasty pressing it so soon, but I just wanted to show you because it looks so nice, doesn't it? But we've still got to sew up the other side and we've still got to put in the other tie. So I'll show you that now. So I've put my side seams right sides together, and then all that happens is we open up the facing, so we open up the facing and sew all the way down the side seam of the camisole and then down the side seam of the facing. Now if you do have a frill, you do need to make sure it stops a little bit back from that seam allowance, because you must not stitch over the frill, which is something I just realised. Right, I'm showing you inside out so you can see the inside of the garment. If you didn't have a frill, you would probably want to do understitching on the facing so it doesn't turn around. I don't need to because I've got the frill there, so it's not going to turn into it. So that's what we've got. I've left these long bits because I'm going to feed them up through I put them on a big needle and then I just sort of weave it in and out. So that's not bad, is it? Oh, you want to see this. I can't hide from you, can I? So this bit here, yeah, don't know what to do with it. But I think what I'll do is just sort of catch it and do a tiny little seam allowance there. But it's not that bad, is it? Because it kind of overlaps. Right, so for those people that are not having tie shoulders, let's talk about you first, because if you're having tie shoulders, then that's straightforward. Right, so what you will need to do is making sure you do not twist. You must not twist your straps. They've got to be fed into that hole at the back. Look, can you see that? So we would feed that into the hole there. So let's see if I can do that now. So I'm going to push it into the hole at the back. I've got a little knot on it, which I think actually helps. So I would push it into there. You know where we left the little gap at the back? Pull it out, making sure I'm not twisting it. And then when you've got it to the right length, yeah, you make sure you've got it to the right length, then you stitch across there a couple of times. And when you've done that, so I'm holding on to it now, then that will be your strap done all nicely, okay? But we're not doing that, of course. So we've just got separate straps, so let's show you what you do for that. So I'm going to turn it inside out. I mean, I could have done this at any time, but I needed to show you how to do the proper strap, okay? So I'm now inside out, look, inside out. I'm at the back, making sure I put them in the right way round, which I can't actually remember, yeah. So putting them the right way round, it's a similar thing. I'm going to pass them through the hole. So look, I can pull it up. So right way round is basically with your seam up, but you'll figure it out, won't you? So I've passed that through the hole at the back, and I'm just going to stitch across there and do the same on the other side, and then I'm finished. So look at that, that is pretty good. Made out of one vintage tourism scarf. Now I've just tied the shoulder bits. I don't know if they're in the right place. And now I'm going to try it on. But before I try it on, I have a question for you. Now, I don't know how long it's going to be on me. I think it will be just about okay. But I have a question for you. Should I add this frill onto the bottom? I can't decide. And then should I add like a skirt onto the bottom as well to make it into a dress? So can we do that comment below thing? It's good for my algorithms and I genuinely want to know. I really like it a lot. Look at that. It's like a kind of tank top, isn't it? Look. Yeah, I love it. Still don't know whether to put a frill on the bottom though, or even a whole skirt. So, the pattern, the actual pattern, is a lot longer, and it also curves as it should. And if you were to shorten it, usually you would shorten it along the proper lengthen and shorten lines. But because I wanted to keep this line here, which was the edge of the scarf, I've done it so it goes straight across. I just felt like I should tell you that. Now, if you enjoyed that, go and have a look at our video where we show you all different sorts of sewing patterns and tell me which sewing pattern you would like me to do next. Okay, thank you so much for watching and see you again very soon. Bye!